Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about, is attraction truly natural, or is it manufactured, or is it a combination of both? So I feel like the easy answer is it's a combination of both. But I still think it's a really interesting concept to think about because when we think about the way that people tend to choose their partners nowadays, I feel like generally speaking, people choose within their race, and then a lot of times they'll choose what's considered the beauty standard of their race, or just where they are in the world or whatever, right? But I can't help but wonder, if we were in a scenario where no one was, see, because all right, I think that part of it is those are things that we're told from a young age. Like, we're told, get with someone of your own race. I say it particularly in instances like in Asian culture, where a lot of times, because I've had, a conversation with someone, she's Asian, and she's told me how, it's so specific. She's Korean, and her parents specifically wanted her to marry a Korean. And so it wasn't even just like, we'll make sure you marry an Asian, or even, specifically an East Asian. No, it's like marry a Korean. And then even more specifically, it's like marry a Christian Korean. And, then it's like when it gets outside of that, it's like, okay, well, if they're not Korean, let the person at least be Asian, and etc. So, you know, and these are things a lot of times I feel like older generations have in their minds, and then they put it on younger generations. And younger generations, a lot of times they do it more so out of respect or acknowledgement for an older generation rather than what it is that they actually want. And so that makes me wonder, just in general, if we were left up to our own devices, what would we choose? And by extension, what would we find attractive? Because right now, like I said, there's a collective idea in different parts in the world, and or in different cultures, races, etc., there are different features which make someone attractive, and therefore make someone more desirable. And I'm talking physically here, not outside of that. But if we're not told that, right? If we're not told who we're supposed to find attractive, then I wonder who we find attractive. Especially because even though people like to say things like beauty is subjective, I would argue that's not necessarily true because, well, there have been studies, showing that children will look at people who are attractive a lot longer than people who are unattractive. Now, I guess one could argue, well, that's kind of a biased thing because we're dictating that the people who they stare at are people that they find attractive. We've deemed them as such. But I would also argue that, wouldn't you want to look at something longer that you find attractive, some versus something that you don't find attractive? Like, yes, there are cases where, you know like the whole saying of watching a car, or not a car, a train wreck, like you can't look away. But I feel like even that comes from a different place, because even if you're looking at that, right, you're looking at it with a more of a morbid curiosity versus if you just look at something and it's not with any sort of like morbidness, but rather you get a certain amount of pleasure out of something. I mean, when you think about things in general, like when you live without throughout your life, what are the things that you tend to look at longer? Things that are pleasing to your eye, things that are found attractive. But so, a baby isn't gonna have any sort of concept of what is attractive yet. It's just going to look, and if it finds it attractive, it's going to stare at it. But as, society starts to play its hand and tell people what's attractive, I feel like perhaps that shifts. But also, maybe it doesn't. Because then, and I think about this too, sexuality, right? There's an argument. Some people say that you're born whatever sexuality you are, and other people say it's fluid. Well, I would say that that once again plays into what I'm saying. If people were left to simply do what came natural to them, who would people more so end up with? Because I would say right now, and I know this is a controversial thing to say, but it is what it is. And I just think this is the case. I think a lot more men, and yes, I'm going to specifically say black men, are homosexual than they want to admit. Now, one could say that, if sexuality is fluid rather than being something that you're born with, then there are reasons for that. There are certain environmental things that contribute to, someone leaning in that direction. But if that's not the case and sexuality is natural, then it's something that they feel. But society, see, that's the thing. See, society has pretty much dictated that, straight is the norm. It's the way that you need to go. And if you deviate from that, then you're bad or disgusting or whatever else. No one wants to identify as those things. And so if you choose not to identify as homosexual, or on the flip side, if you just, you want to say you're straight, you don't want to say you're anything but that, then it's not necessarily coming from a genuine place, because, it could be based more on fear. And a lot of people, I feel like, end up in relationships, whatever you want to call it, that they shouldn't be in, because they don't want to be honest with themselves. And then other people tend to get hurt in the process. Because regardless of what way you look at it, right? Like if you're straight, but you're in a homosexual relationship for whatever reason, then your partner is suffering, and vice versa. If you're homosexual, but you're in a heterosexual relationship, then your partner is suffering. But again, a lot of that comes down to what society has deemed to be natural and what it hasn't. So, again, I just wonder what is actually natural versus what is what society says. But also, is society dictating what you should be attracted to? Is that inherently an issue? I feel like the answer mostly is yes, but not always. Because, for example, some would argue that being attracted to children is natural, but that's not something that society, um, what's the word I'm going for? It's not something that society supports or encourages, which is for the best for numerous reasons. Um, But again, if that is something that's natural, though again, it could be argued that it's not because it's due to certain traumas and such that happen at a certain point in your life. But, you know, either way, society has said that is wrong, and I wouldn't necessarily say that's an issue. So, in that case, I guess you could argue that society saying that an attraction is wrong isn't necessarily an issue if the attraction can cause harm. I feel like some people would say, though, that, well, any sort of relationship, attraction based, whatever, can cause harm. You could have a heterosexual relationship where, the person in it is being harmed. But I would also argue that society says that if you are in that type of relationship, you should get out of it. I don't think it's promoted as healthy. I don't think society is going around saying, oh, abusive relationships are healthy. I mean, I guess you could argue that there are certain depictions in the media that support that. But even if that's the case, it's entertainment. Not to say that it doesn't have an effect on society and the way it moves, but in general, I think most people would say that abuse is wrong, therefore, it's not supported. But again, I'm just really wondering, you know, what attraction is a real natural attraction, because even when it comes to attraction between races, I know that there is the argument of, people tend to stick with people who look like them. And I think that that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a very strong argument. However, we often hear so many connections of race with a certain type of depiction. Um, for example, a lot of times whiteness is linked with high status. Uh, Blackness is kind of the exact opposite. Um, Asian gets linked with, well, at least for women, at the very least, is linked with being more docile and feminine. And so when you take certain stereotypes or archetypes or whatever you want to call them, and you start to commonly associate them with a certain race, I wonder, people who say that they're attracted to a certain race, is it for genuine reasons, or is it because of, those stereotypes, archetypes, etc.? Is it that? Or are you genuinely attracted to that person and, the way that they look? And by extension, if you are attracted to, those things that don't actually have to do with someone's physical features, does being attracted to that then make you more susceptible to being attracted to those features? So, for example, say you're a say you're a black woman and you're attracted to um Asian men. I'm just throwing this out there, right? Uh, and maybe the reason why you're, you know what? No. I want to use a more stereotypical example. Say that you're a man, I don't care what race you are, you're more attracted to Asian women. Your reason for being attracted to Asian women is because they're more docile and feminine and etc. Now, those are all non-physical traits. But because you are attracted to those traits, do you then as the man look at Asian women and start to appreciate their skin color, their hair color, their facial features, do you start to admire those because of the non-physical, or did you genuinely find those physical features attractive beforehand? Those are just questions that I wonder a lot of times. And, while I could look up studies, and a lot of times I watch videos that will discuss um, related studies to these sorts of things, I feel like at the end of the day, really with most sort of societal studies, there's only so much that they're going to be able to do because there are too many there are too many things that can't properly be controlled, and too many things that can't really be changed, that'll always, I feel like, make it more biased. Like, you would have to actually go out of your way for a study like this. You'd have to, like, get children and actually ostracize them. You'd have to do, like, a Lord of the Flies type of thing. So I don't know that there's really any sort of real study that can be done on this to get a definitive answer. But regardless of whether there's one or not, I find it very interesting because I think it also affects, the way that people can just end up looking in the future as far as who people choose to partner with. Because why people choose to partner with them is very important. If the reason why most people partner with other people has to do with non physical traits, then all it would take really a lot of times is the media saying, or, well, actually, either or, physical or non physical traits. One could argue that once the media says that a certain thing is attractive, more people will start to shift to that thing, whatever it is, and it can change the way that people start to look in the future. I just think it's an interesting concept, and really affects society and the way different people move in it. I just find it to be an interesting thought, and I wanted to discuss it because I also think it plays into, because I was going to do a video on our skin preferences races, but I think that ties into this as well, so I just wanted to talk about it as a collective. Anyway, if you find this type of thing interesting, or you have anything that you want to add to the conversation, feel please feel free. I always find it interesting to hear others' opinions. In any case, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed, and hope to catch you in the next one.